Okay, so we'll move on to item D.1, 2024-2025 work planning update.
Sorry, we're on mute there. We'll keep this rather short so we can move on to the next item, but I just wanted to let everyone know that as we speak, we're just trying to synthesize all of the engagement that we did with industry ending in early January. I'll just tell you that from our first scan of the results, we don't see any dramatic changes coming in terms of the updating the standards and procedures or the principles of urban design, which I think is good news. Having said that, I think to keep the thing moving along and to keep everyone in the loop in terms of scheduling, we do have a subcommittee meeting scheduled, I think, for January the 27th. And so what we would do is endeavor to get in front of the subcommittee the draft what we heard report and any major changes we see to the standards and procedures and principles of urban design. And then based on that conversation, we can take March and April to then bring those two pieces of work to their conclusion. And for some reason, Wes has his hand up.
Did you mean February 27th?
Oh, yes. What did I say? January?
Yeah. You said January.
Sorry, February 27th.
Clarification, yeah. Okay, yeah. Good.
Yes. So that's the update on that item. It's fairly straightforward, and at this point, there's not really any action that's needed by the committee, but I'll still entertain any questions that you have about that before we move on.
Okay. Not seeing any.
Okay, that's I think good. All right, well then let's move on to the next item here. So the next item is hopefully a fairly quick conversation around the upcoming work plan. Just going to beam it onto the screen here. So everyone has had a chance to look at this. So I think the best thing to do is we've got the Google Doc here and it has all of your comments. And I think it would just be good to just go through it and as needed, discuss and or hopefully resolve some of these comments, get your blessing. And with that, we can finish it up. We have to submit this on Friday of this week. So time is of the essence. So yeah, if nobody has any objections, let's just go through it. So Nick, I don't know what your comment is here, but because I trust you, we're just gonna say yeah. Yeah, I'll just make an introductory comment here. Like I have listed 5 goals. I have mentioned, I think in previous correspondence that the city clerk's office suggests we use a maximum of 3. And I don't think there's any magic to that except to say that it helps keep us in check in terms of what our capacity allows us to do. We did have 4 last year. One of them did include the goal of reviewing development applications. And I think some of you have mentioned this, and I responded that even last year we had this conversation with the city clerk and they were fairly adamant that reviewing development applications is actually one of your goals. And one of the reasons why is because it can be measured and tracked. So I don't think, or I would advise at any point in disagreeing with OCC and just leaving that as a goal and continuing on. Janice?
Okay, I guess when I was reading this, I was reading them similar to main committee goals and subcommittee goals. So I don't know whether or not there's a way to put them in the order of like here is the things that the committee is going to do because it's our mandate and it's what we do, yeah. Versus what is actually dedicated work, because I'm assuming, Peter, we're going to have to make another request for a subcommittee again.
Yeah, and that is at the end of this work plan.
So I don't know whether or not we reorganize them, or whether or not in the request for a subcommittee, like, is it clear enough of what is day-to-day work versus what is additional focus?
Well, I can jump down, but while I'm doing so, I guess, Janice, I'll tell you, this is laid out exactly the way we laid out last year's. And there was no, I'll just say no issue on either the city clerk's or council's side in terms of how it was presented.
Okay, and it's probably a moot point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. It doesn't seem like a strategic goal, but again, this was the direction that we were, given last year, and I'm assuming it's the same this year. So this would just have to be updated. You can see on your screen here, we would just update this to match the numbers that are above. Oops, that's not what I intended to do. Anyway, we can catch that. So with that in mind, the other goals are finishing the changes to the boundary, implementing new committee resources, and I know that Craig's got a comment here. We'll jump into that in a second. Goal number 4, we're still looking into whether or not this would just be, this one here, whether this would just be a matter of course that we would do because we have a new council. I see your comment, Janice, and again, I think either way we could probably remove this as a standout goal and just do it as part of your work. And then the last goal is the recent projects, the audit that I think David started talking about and others have jumped on. Maybe Nick, before you do that, I wouldn't mind just dealing with Craig's comment here with regards to goal number 3 and new committee resources. You've got here, Craig, second highest priority and then highest priority.
Oh, I think that was, maybe it was because, did you have a comment somewhere about it was 5 too many, or maybe I was misreading what Janice wrote, and I just kind of, I thought our boundary was the second highest priority, and then the updated standards as procedures, like obviously that would be our highest priority. So if we were ranking them, that was all. It was just
okay.
That was all I intended to make.
Yeah, and I haven't ranked them, but anyone who would read them would inherently, intuit that there's some priority here. Having said that, it's at least my opinion that the boundary is highest priority because it's work that hasn't been completed. But again, that if you folks want to reorganize this, that's totally fine. I'm happy to take whatever direction you are suggesting.
Yeah, I think as long as all of us are on board of what the priorities are, like, to me, it doesn't matter if they're ranked.
Yeah.
Like I said, my struggle was, putting a goal of reviewing development applications. Well, that's our mandate. Like we have to be doing that or we wouldn't be fulfilling our mandate. That's where I was struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can double check that, but again, that's what we were told last year. So, yeah. We're having some conversations with OCC about some other things, so we can follow up on that. It would lighten the load a little bit if we didn't have all these things that we look like we're trying to do.
Well, and I think it's good, like to Craig's point, I think it's good for when this gets presented to council, that we understand when we present to council of what the priorities are versus what is day-to-day work of the committee, versus what work has been complete, and the lion's share of the work has been complete, like goal number 3.
Yeah. Nick, I don't want to lose you. You had your hand up.
It's maybe a little bit of a side thing, Peter, but I was just curious, the council information session, weren't we meant to do, did I miss something? Because weren't we trying to organize that last year? It never happened.
Well, we've been trying to organize a council luncheon for some time, and it's just not, it's just not been able to do it.
Yeah.
So,
all right. I just thought, I know last year there were dates put out and we set things up and then it moved again. And
yeah.
Yeah.
It, it unfortunately is a very difficult thing to organize because of all the moving parts. And I don't think you were here for this, but there was some conversation that with a new council, it would be worth the committee's while to redouble, I won't say committee, it's really administration's, need to redouble our efforts to get that in place. But
Yeah.
the other part of the question would be, and this is what the folks at City Hall remind us, is that, there's one thing which is a council luncheon and there's another thing which is a council information session. And they're two slightly different things.
Yeah.
You can talk about different things at each one. And the question that we've put to OCC is, what is their advice in terms of what's the best avenue to pursue? And in fact, because we do have a new council, you, like every other council committee, may actually be required to do a council information session. And so we're just trying to get that under control because, in either case, we could almost remove this goal from consideration if we know we have to do one of these things.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, I see it came up and I was trying to think last year that it was organized. And I know they're really busy, so it doesn't surprise me. I'm just wondering how realistic it is. So
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so those are the goals. The one thing that we didn't get around to last week when we sent this out was to try to put some timing to things. And so we've done that, and this will be the first time you've seen it. Now, I'll caveat all this by saying that the timeline is, I think, in my opinion, not terribly important in the sense that we will have to do all kinds of project planning once council gives us direction to do this work. But having said that, we did go and sort of pencil in how we think this work would unfold. Now, before we do that, I'm just going to make a couple of kind of comments here. One is, and this has sort of come up with the reporting timeline that we're in right now, is that we've actually structured things to try to be mindful of the fact that we really need to get anything done that we want to report back to council on by the end of the calendar year 2025. And that's because it's not, too far into the next year that we've got to get the annual report done. So we've structured things accordingly. The other thing we've done here is just be mindful of the fact that, you have limited capacity, we have limited capacity. So we've kind of tried to stretch things out a bit to reflect that. And of course, if we can accelerate any of this, we will. But, that's why when we scroll down, you're going to see that, some things we're just going to hopefully leave until the first quarter of 2026, for example. So here are the goals, and I've just highlighted a couple of things again to build on this idea that because of the reporting structure, there are certain things we want to get done by a certain time. So for example, we've said here that we would want to do our industry engagement on the EDC boundary refinement before the end of 2025 so that what we hear can be added into the council report as a bit of a heads up prior to us actually doing the bylaw amendment. And then we would actually do the bylaw amendment in the first quarter of 2026 before the end of the term. And similarly here, you folks talked about the need to look at some self-assessment for the committee. So those are tools that we would develop and roll out prior to the end of the year, again, with the notion that the findings of that self-assessment can inform both the annual report, but also the membership report. And then lastly, again, this goal of doing an audit of projects. Now, again, like we don't have the time to get into the specifics of this right now in terms of our work, in terms of, how many projects and all that, like that all have to be worked out. But obviously we believe it's a value. And as a side note, I'll just reinforce the importance of really taking this to council, because this gives you the license to ask us to do it, because we really need that, because we can't just do it without some license. But again, we would have this work done by 2025, the end of 2025. So again, from the perspective of your work and you reporting to council through the annual report, you'll have some insight into what impact your work is having, so that if you foresee needing to make changes to the mandate or any of the work you do, or as a lead into the next year's work plan, you've got that information in your back pocket. So there is some preliminary thinking around timing here, which we've never done before. And I think that's, I think on our part, a little bit of maturing around how we report and mindful of council's role in all this. And this table here, some of you will know, is the exact copy of last year's, because it really doesn't change. We would just here, I think to Janice's point, just confirm that this is really around strategic work outside of the day-to-day function of the committee and reviewing development applications. So I think that's the overview, and I think to the degree we can, we've talked about at least the comments that have been put in. I think at this point I would just open it up to any other comments or questions that you have in the interest of buttoning this down tonight. Janice.
Peter, do you think we need to be clear in regards to the rollout of committee self-assessment tools, that these are in addition to the C575 summary of evaluation form for reappointment?
I think that wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe on that note, again, like we sort of take what we hear from you folks and do what we can with it. I'm going to go on a limb and say, I think it was Karen that actually suggested this. It might be a good time to, in addition to making that clarity or being clear relative to C575, what are the other kind of objectives that you would collectively see, or benefits or outcomes of the self-assessment that we could maybe elaborate on here? And without putting you on the spot, Karen, if I was correct, anything you want to add to this conversation?
To be honest, I am incredibly jet lagged right now. I cannot remember.
Okay.
What I was going for there.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe to that, Peter, just in case people don't remember what the C575 evaluations are, like they're very minimal. They're like, you attend meetings, you're on time, you seem prepared.
Yeah.
You actually, understand your role, you're willing to participate. Those type of things, instead of where I'm hoping the self-assessment tools may be more in depth than.
Yeah, like if I had to guess, I think it's more around things like, workload. Ultimately it'd be like maybe overall satisfaction, engagement. I don't know. Just, anything in case we're asked by council to kind of round out this idea would be helpful. Let's see here. Yeah, we say to support future recruitment, ensure member engagement and satisfaction, and maximize overall committee performance. And again, I guess the other thing I would say is, I don't know if we need to spell this out completely. The terms of reference for this would be something that we would start to develop in earnest in May, and then really flesh out what this work would look like. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. Well, Janice, I think we've got the direction we need here. I would maybe suggest if there's anything that we could benefit from in terms of any minor wordsmithing, if we could maybe call upon you over the next couple days, but I think generally we have this in hand.
Yeah, I think it looks good.
Yeah.
I think based on, what I heard from Craig, etc., there's enough to go on when we present this to council.
Yeah, like it is, and I'm not trying to minimize it. I don't think it has to be an exhaustive exercise. Like it just needs to chart out a general course. And I think this does that. And I also think, unlike the year that we're just wrapping up, it's a somewhat lighter load for everybody to do this work, but still very valuable in terms of what we're going to collectively get out of it.
I did actually have one more, Peter, if you're going to talk with OCC.
Yeah, go ahead.
Being's the work of goal number 2 for finalizing the changes to the EDC boundary will require bylaw amendment.
Yes.
And I think by the bylaws, at a minimum of every 5 years, we have to review our bylaw. Does this reset the clock on our 5-year?
Okay, that's a great question.
Because that should be something to flag for future work plannings.
Yeah.
Is that bylaw review has to happen. I believe it's on a 5-year cycle. At least it used to be.
Yeah.
And if so, if this bylaw amendment resets whatever the timeline is, and we can just keep that in the back of our minds.
Okay, we'll ask about that, because I again, we could have wrote 10 things in here, I think. We've talked about this, I think, a little bit. At some point, it would be good for the committee to switch to a multi-year work planning cycle, and keeping in mind, and I have to be honest, I didn't know that we had to do this every 5 years, so thank you. It seems like a 5-year cycle would be a good starting point for some multi-year planning. Anyway, I'm rambling. We'll look into it and confirm.
Okay. Yeah, it used to be 5 years. I don't know what it is after they did the last big bylaw update. So.
Yeah, and what constitutes a bylaw, bylaw update? Like the bylaw gets tweaked almost every year, so, and I doubt that resets it, but yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah, or if there's specific requirements and we can loop it into this bylaw.
Yeah, exactly.
Amendment, or whether or not they've standardized it like what they have with reappointment of perms, and it's on a set cycle no matter what.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great catch.
Doesn't impact this, but I know OCC.
Let's hope it doesn't.
Well, it shouldn't.
Because if it does, then we've got one goal next year, which is updating the bylaw. Okay. All right. You want to move on, Janice, or do you want to entertain any other questions or comments?
Well, going once, going twice. Does anyone else have anything to say? Okay. No. Okay, so we'll move on to item E. Upcoming applications, conflicts, and regrets. February 18th, the day after Family Day.
Yeah.
We're showing one. Oh, Mindy?
Yeah, I'll be a regret.
Okay, sounds good. Oh, Neil? Oh, Neil left.
Wow.
Did he go to unmute?
Yeah,
exactly. I went to unmute and I hit the upside down phone icon. Where is this project?
This project is kitty corner to us. It is on the northeast corner of 101 Street and 103A Ave.
Yeah, the backyard with the outdoor patio.
Yeah.
I might have a conflict.
Okay. And not to get ahead of ourselves, like this is a very there's sort of a unique circumstance around the project, so we're gonna make sure the committee is absolutely clear on, why this is being brought forward and what, what we believe the scope of consideration should be, just so that you're well armed. We also I guess we can say there's another tentative project that we're looking at called, what's it called?
It is called 111 Avenue Cluster Row Housing.
Yes, there's a cluster row housing project, 111 Ave, and what's the street? It's in
I can't remember.
the 116-ish.
Somewhere around
Yeah.
there.
Anyway, we can't give you any more information and tell you if there's a conflict. So if we determine it's good to go, you will see it in the agenda this coming Friday. We're just working with them now to make sure it's a complete package. And then if there's a conflict, you can let us know, but I don't think there will be. All right, Janice, back to you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, next is adjournment. So we can adjourn the meeting at 5:22 p.m.
Perfect. Okay, we're off. Okay. Janice.